Alright guys, welcome to this week's behind the scenes prep week, right? So as usual, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do my prep work, do my analysis over here as I record this down. Okay, and I'll be sharing a little bit of a commentary as we progress along the way. Okay, and of course, when you're watching this, ideally, I want you to focus on the objective over here. It's really not to kind of like not really meant for a trade signal or things like that, but I just want you to really see how the application of the principles that we mentioned, right? And hopefully you'll be able to pick this up and acquire the skill set and ability to do it yourself in your own trading as well. Right, so with that, we'll get started for the week. Okay, so as usual, we're going to get started with the dollar index first. Okay, so for the dollar index, you can see essentially we're in a range bound environment. I think on the 4-hour time frame is super clear. So in this kind of context, as long as the market is within this range, especially right now, we can see it's in the middle, okay, of the top and the bottom boundary. We'll rather maintain a very neutral perspective, and let's see how it goes, right? Of course, if the market decides to go higher, and we kind of see a potential reversal here, that would be a much better opportunity to get involved in the sell. Similarly, if the market decides to come down, we kind of see a little bit of a pattern that we can actually look to execute a trade, then we'll rather look at the buy at the bottom, right? But definitely not in the middle of this range environment. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear cut. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so I think euro dollar is definitely something that is gonna be worth monitoring next week. I think very straightforward over here. As long as the market maintains below this level, okay, we do expect more downside. So the idea here is wait for a potential setup, either as a flag here, or this might also turn out into maybe a potential double top. Okay, then we'll look for the sell. Okay, but overall, as long as the market remains below this high, around 1.1185, then we'll expect more downside, and we'll have a directional bias for the bearish side of this one over here. Okay, so that's on euro dollar. Okay, so pound dollar I think quite clear. On the daily scale, nothing much has changed since last week. So overall, we're still looking for the downside, okay, to retest at least the bottom of this channel over here, then the bigger move to the upside. On the 4-hour time frame, right now we're seeing that this can potentially develop into a flag. Okay, and if that's the case, then we can expect one more push to the downside, breaking this low, and then maybe from there, we might see a bigger kind of like rejection back up. Okay, but until then, we'll rather maintain overall a bearish view. Okay, but of course, we want to definitely see how price reacts off this after its pullback. Okay, another perspective some of you might be able to see is that this can also be seen as kind of like a inverse head and shoulder pattern. Not the best one over here, but you know, technically that can be also the case. And if let's say this starts to push off impulsively, okay, then we'll need to reassess that. Okay, but for now, this is gonna be my primary forecast based on what I'm seeing at the moment, right? So that's on the pound dollar side. Okay, next we have the dollar Canadian. Okay, so on dollar CAD, essentially on the daily, I think it's clearer. Okay, so we see that we have a very obvious 1, 2, 3 potentially completing around this zone. Of course, this can extend a little bit and retest the bottom. Okay, but overall, I think the momentum is due to the downside. And on the 4-hour time frame, we might see that the market develop into a 4th wave next week. If let's say this is going to be very corrective in nature, then that opens up the possibility for one more push to the downside to complete that 5th wave before the bigger move to the upside. Okay, so overall, I think for me, I'll be rather patient on the dollar CAD. Give time to the market and see what's going to develop, and then from there on, only we're going to make a decision as to whether do we want to get involved in the buy trade. Okay, so that's on the dollar Canadian side. Okay, next up we have the dollar yen. Okay, so daily wise, okay, so I think daily is quite clear. We do have this impulse push, but right now, from last week, we had a little bit of pullback. So again, most of the time, whenever we see a strong push, we do expect a longer and bigger correction to develop. Okay, so that's the part where we don't want to rush into things as well. Okay, so on the 4-hour time frame, what we can start to forecast a little bit, of course, is as long as the market maintains below this high, we can expect a bigger corrective. And again, one of the principles we cover in the training over here is we always say that expect a 3-wave push, right? So that's one of the principles. We definitely then expect this to develop into something like that. Right, so we can expect a deeper pullback. The question is whether or not to look for that sell. Okay, but for me, this is naturally something that I wouldn't want to pay too much attention to right now. If you're looking at the yen, last week we cover that's another as of Friday, right? Last week, we actually had another clearer setup on one of the yen pairs. So personally, I wouldn't be paying too much attention on the dollar yen, but instead on the other setup, right? So just to cover that on this analysis. Okay, and dollar franc over here. Okay, so dollar franc over here, daily basically is not the best right now. 4 hour, basically we're expecting a little bit of a bounce here. Definitely not a trade that you want to be paying too much attention to, but this is basically the forecast, right? For me, something like that, I would definitely be not paying too much attention, or rather focus on some other clearer setups that I'm gonna get. Okay, so great. That's on the major categories. Okay, so I think from a major category over here, the dollar related, the two that is probably going to be a little bit more interesting will be euro dollar as well as the pound dollar. Good. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the next category under the commodities segment.